All right, welcome to another episode of the Joe and Doug Show. We're hanging back here on the sofas. It's summertime and hot in Youngstown.
I haven't been outside today. It could be anything out there.
Yeah, but we are pumped that you're with us. We have a guest with us, Pastor Mike from Bridge of Hope, and we are going to talk today about all kinds of good stuff. But first, you can call in 330-595-1600 and be a part of the show. You can ask some questions, and you can win Joe's loot. Money. And Joe's money is how much is in the safe right now?
$1,000 plus a pair of AirPod Pros.
Ooh.
Oh, look at.
And what are the hints?
Okay, so I'm gonna hand it. So
Thank you, Vanna.
So, the number came from the face of a clock. Partner, 1 even, 2 odd, and probably not a zero is in the number.
Now, are we adding a clue because it's $1,000 or not yet?
Well, the clue was that I actually posted this morning the spreadsheet, a picture of the spreadsheet of the remaining numbers.
Oh, and I screenshotted it.
Did you really?
Oh, yeah.
Can you read it?
As soon as I saw it.
I blurred the crap of that out.
Yeah, but you can figure it out.
Yeah, you could. I mean, it's not that
You have to spend a little
hard.
bit of time.
Okay.
But there's about 150...
Less than that, like 130, a little under 130.
Options, and then you can win $1,000.
So you can tell. You don't have to go back and listen to all the shows.
You know, Pastor Mike is getting married this summer.
Could you use that 1,000?
Should we let him put a code in and see what happens? Let's see if you win the $1,000.
I make the rules. You do what you want.
So you get 3-digit code.
3-digit code.
2 odd, 1 even. It's probably not a zero, because Joe wasn't sure if zero was odd or even.
Yes.
And got it from Face of a Clock and Partner. So why don't you go ahead and give it a guess? You punch it right in. 3 numbers, or Joe
I'll
punch it in.
you. 3-digit code.
3-digit code.
Try it.
I'm thinking.
Okay.
What would, if I was Joe?
Well, if you try the Joe ones, you're going to be wrong, because everybody already tried those ones.
We tried Tesla's favorite numbers, 369. We tried a couple of those.
Okay, 2 odd, 1 even. I was going to say 330 just to be stupid.
That was guessed about 9 times.
But it's probably not a zero.
Right.
Probably not a zero. See, you got that.
Yeah. So let's go 503.
Probably not a zero.
Or 523.
I can't do 2 back to back, but I can't hit the number. Wait.
Anyway, you can call in and you can enter your stuff in. Please don't use a zero like Pastor Mike.
Remember that time I said it wasn't a zero, and then I said zero, and he typed it in before I could change it?
So,
I didn't know I was supposed to have put a buffer in there for your slow working.
We should have come back to the end of the show.
2-second delay, people.
No, we're just having a good time. The way that, God has positioned certain relationships and all of that has just been really special. I was with the guy who did your landscaping this afternoon, too. Phil. But the way God's positioned some of those relationships, like what Joe does, and here at Youngstown Studio, they just had, another cool guest in the show before this. There's a ton of speculation as to whether or not he's going to run for office, and just kind of cool the people that God keeps bringing through the door here at Youngstown Studio. And Pastor Mike was on a podcast earlier with me, and I said, hey, you want to come on the show tonight? He said, what are we talking about? I'm like, this is Joe and my secret sauce. We don't know what we're going to talk about.
No. Does that make you uncomfortable? I need to know. Little Pico?
Un poquito.
So what I thought we'd talk about, so it's a spin-off of Thursday's show.
Okay.
So Thursday we got into ghosts and ended up talking about all things kind of supernatural and had some fun with, I obviously, there's a scripture for that. But
I have to run way over there.
Yeah, that's a really far button today. We'll have to teach Lucas our ways here so that he knows.
You know the heart button? Bottom right.
The very bottom.
Bottom, yeah. There we go.
Yeah. Anytime I say there's a scripture for that, Joe pushes that button.
Gotcha.
So,
Anytime I say any numbers, just hit that wah, wah, wah.
I want to kind of continue this conversation because I think Pastor Mike will bring an interesting perspective into this. So we talked about supernatural. We talked about stuff outside of time and space. Talked about heaven, death, all that stuff. We went down several rabbit trails on Thursday. It was quite fun.
Is it a rabbit trail or a rabbit hole? I think it's a rabbit hole.
Hole? Yeah, hole.
Okay.
Like Alice in Wonderland, down the rabbit hole.
Gotcha.
So we talked about all things supernatural. We talked about ghosts and all that stuff. So rapid fire, yes or no on ghosts? No?
Well, one.
Okay. And then demons, all that sort of stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. And then could demons be mistaken for ghosts?
Sure.
Okay. And then what else did we get into? Aliens? No.
Bigfoot.
Maybe?
Nessie?
Maybe?
And so where I kind of want to go with this, and where I think you'll have a little bit, more in this, is we got onto some of the church stuff, and we were talking about things like healing and supernatural stuff and exorcism and all that. And I know you've done some mission work around the world, and I know you've had some pretty awesome experiences in different services, scenarios, etc. So I thought we'd talk a little bit about some of that because it interests Joe from the standpoint that there's not necessarily scientific explanation for it. He's interested in exploring it, asking the hard questions.
Yes.
And he knows that I'm not afraid of any of those things. And so I will talk about the stuff that I'm like, yep, that's really weird. Don't quite understand, how that works. I don't understand, but this is what happened. So give us, have you experienced or seen people healed supernaturally, and what has that experience been? How did that come about? I know you've shared a couple of these in sermons I've heard you tell, so I know there's a couple big ones for you. So give us a healing story that you've seen.
Well, probably, I've seen a couple of them, but I'll start with right out of Bible college. I went to, it's now South Carolina School of Leadership. You should check it out, SCSL. I think it's scsl.com. Check it out. But anyway, right out of there, I went and spoke at a camp in Wakefield, Virginia. It's this small town, and there's all these, there's like cabins and stuff, and there's a chapel there, and they asked me to come speak through a contact that I knew, and they said, why don't you come speak? I said, sure, never done that, but let's do it. So started seeing some people got saved, and there was one kid by the name of Thomas. He was part of the worship team that year, and he just was praying for people, and they were getting healed left and right. And there was one girl that your meniscus is in your knee, right? I think that's right. We were skating, and she fell and tore her meniscus. Went to the doctor. They put her in this like big leg thing and sent her on her way. She couldn't really walk or anything, and then he prayed for her, and she's like, I feel fine, and was like able to do all the things that she shouldn't be able to do with a torn meniscus. There was another guy, an older fella.
We're in Kentucky now.
There was an older feller
We're
guy,
only 30
man.
minutes from West Virginia.
But anyway,
Can you go down to the well and fetch me some more water?
Get some twine with pop.
water. Get some water.
Water.
Oh man, what did I get myself into? But there was an older guy, and I think it was his back, and this guy prayed for him, and his back was healed. He was fine, no more pain, and that was kind of like I'd seen some stuff, but that was probably one of the closest encounters I had. And so he and I were talking, and I was like, tell me all about this, and he told me some stuff and whatnot. And so anyway, so there was this girl that was there. She was just helping with the camp. She was a leader, a counselor, and they played this game, and I don't even know what it was, but it was like raining and stuff. And then she went in to they played this game called Watermelon Wars, which is crazy.
Chuck
You're in a
watermelons at
pool,
each other.
You're in a pool, and you grease up a watermelon, and then you have to fight and get the watermelon out on the other side. It's interesting, but
I feel like I skipped a lot of things in life.
I was not involved in Watermelon Wars, but I had heard about it and saw it. But anyway, so after she helped with that, and so Like the pool, she was wet, so she gets out. It's raining. She's wet. She goes into do something on the stage. I don't know what it was, but she got electrocuted, and it shot like all the way through her body. She went to unplug something or plug something in, got electrocuted all the way through her body. She gets taken to the hospital. They do a bunch of tests and everything, and they're like, you're probably never going to be able to use your right leg correctly ever again. And now this girl is a dancer. Like, that's what she grew up doing. She loves to dance. It's like one of her favorite things ever. And so she was like brokenhearted at this, right? And so I remember she came back from the doctor, and she was having a hard time walking around. They're like, you know, you may regain most control, but you're always going to have like maybe a little bit of a twitch or whatever, and it's never going to be 100%. And so they're like, you'll probably never dance again. You'll never be able to control it well enough to dance. So during worship, I saw her, and like I was like, I got to pray for you. And so I just prayed for her, and I just was like, Lord, you know that her dance is like her form of worship to you, and so I just pray that you restore that to her, and that this won't be something that she has to deal with. And she got up, and there was no pain. She was completely fine. She went up and said something. They're like, no, you're dancing right now. And she just like danced in front of everyone, like completely fine. And to my knowledge, has never had an issue with that since. There was one time recently in when was it? 3 weeks ago that I preached? Was it 3 weeks?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, 3 or 4 weeks ago.
3 or 4 weeks ago, I preached a message, and like I called for altar time and called people down, and there was a lady that came down, and she was like, I need you to pray for me. And if you know this lady, you're like, no, you need to be praying for me. Yeah. But she came down, and she's like, hey, I've been to the doctor, and she has arthritis in her knee, and she had it like scraped out of her knee, which sounds super fun, right? She's like, I'm in a lot of pain, and I'm walking, but it hurts real bad. And I was like, okay, well, let's pray. And so I just prayed over her real quick, and I was like, you know, take this pain away, and do what only you can. And so then she grabs my hand and starts walking down the aisle like I'm supposed to walk with her, and I'm like, what's going on?
I'm not getting married till July.
And so then I go, we went like up the aisle, and then we turned around, we came back down, and we get to the bottom, and she starts doing one of these, like this, and I'm going, what is going on right now? Like, who is, what in the world is happening?
Yeah.
And I'm going, is she in like a huge amount of pain? Is she thinking that she's fine?
Yeah. And
then she took off and went back in to the people at the altar, and I couldn't follow her, so I was like, I guess you're okay, goodbye. And she just left, and later that night she called me and was like, hey, I just want you to know, like, I've had no pain since, completely fine. In fact, I need to go back for like a follow-up visit to the doctor, and so she's like, I'll keep you posted. She calls me like a week later, after she goes to the doctor, and this is what's crazy, all right? So she gets to the doctor, and the doctor says, he goes, you're completely fine. You don't need to be here. She goes, oh yeah, I know. I told you that. I'm healed. And started going into the whole thing about, hey, you know, my pastor prayed for me, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, that's amazing. He's like, that's amazing. You're literally, there's nothing wrong with you. Like, you shouldn't need to come back ever. And he goes, I'll tell you what, I will walk you, the doctor said this, I will walk you out to the front desk, and you will not pay for this visit. And what doctor does that? And so he literally walks her out and says, give her money back. And she gets her money back for that appointment and takes off, and she's been fine since. So.
All right, Joe, turn on the skeptical juices, and
okay, I'm ready.
Let's look at this. So, you know, we've talked on podcasts before. My wife had a thyroid issue. It was a blood thing. It was measured in the blood, all that sort of stuff. prayed for, went back, has been back now 2-3 years. Everything's normal. She just had a physical and remains in that space of healing where she was going to have to be on medication for the rest of her life. Some people would look at that and say, well, maybe the initial blood work was wrong. Some people would look at that and say, the pain ones, right? People always explain that away with like, well, it was all in their mind. It was a group thing. But, how do you navigate that being a science guy? Because people could say anything.
Sure.
So how do you look at that, and what helps you in this? Because I'm sure we have viewers, we have people that are going to listen to this later, and they're like, that's nice, Pastor. I'm sure that lady was just being nice, or you know what I mean?
Right.
Because everybody wants to land on that side. How would you measure some of this? How could we in a faith community better communicate this and establish a track record, if you will?
Well, there's nothing magical about it. Okay.
Okay.
This is a phenomenon that. This is a phenomenon that is rooted in science and physics.
Okay.
And I'm the resident crazy person around here, by the way. I don't believe in time, right? And so if you take time out of any one of these equations, you could put yourself in the frame of mind of where you want to become. So you want to become president, right? If you could put yourself in the frame of mind that you're going to be president and time is out of the equation, it's just a matter of what before you become president. Your belief. That's really the only two ways about it. So when we do sort of business exercises, when I go through the sort of the habits of drawing things closer to me by the belief that they're there, and it's only as far away from me as I can believe it to be. So everything has to do with faith. That's really, faith gets you through the time that it takes for something to be realized. That's the whole process of manifestation. So you would make someone believe that healing can happen. Right? And so you're just connecting them with the metaphysical. The physical can't explain it, right? Bones don't hear themselves or whatever, but the healing that's in the future and bringing that healing towards them without the passage of time is really what the metaphysical would be.
Interesting. So you would say the healing is in the future, or
Yes.
Only in the future, not in the past?
No such thing.
Okay.
Remember, it's all at the same
Yeah,
time.
yeah,
So
okay.
the experience is wherever
Now.
you take it. So wherever you believe it could be,
Right.
the more faith that you have that you can explore the now, future, and past, you can travel back and forth.
What if I asked you,
Do it.
what if I said that I believe the healing is in the spiritual realm, not the physical realm?
I think,
Well, I think it's one and the same.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think there's much difference. Like you would think the physical realm is something that you experience, and I don't believe that. I think the perception is yours, like what's in your head and how you interpret things. But I don't think there's a separation between the two.
Okay.
yeah. It's Genesis chapter 1, right? God creates everything, and then Adam hears God walking through the garden in the cool of the day. You have this blending of the physical and the spiritual, and then when they lose the garden, they lose this whole realm. They lose this connection with God, the ability to see that, and then every once in a while it pokes through in our world,
Exactly.
in a church service or in a connection with somebody or out in nature or wherever. You have these kind of experiences, and Heaven is for Real, that book. Like you have people to out of body. We talked a little bit about that, and I think his thing with time that we talked about that I thought was really fascinating is, it takes that scripture that Paul says to be out of the body is to be present with the Lord. But then
Man.
Lucas is learning. And it allows it the space that we need theologically then to have a final resurrection and judgment with the Lamb's Book of Life and that sort of stuff, all at the end time stuff. And like, well, how can I be out of the body present with the Lord and then he's going to bring me down and judge me at the lake of fire? Well, if it's outside of time and space and I die, I'm there and there.
Yep, exactly.
Which
That's the hang up is time. If you take time out of the equation, all this stuff makes a little bit more sense.
Well, God's not bound by space or time anyways.
right, we say that all the
There you
time.
go.
But in terms of healing or death, I never positioned it in terms of the time frame.
There was one. The reason I asked the question I did was this. One in I believe it's I want to say Hebrews. It says that the unseen world is more real than the seen world.
Right.
Right. And I remember when I was in Florida as a youth pastor, it was right towards the beginning of my time there, so probably 2010, 2011, somewhere in there. I did this thing with the youth, and we did like a photo scavenger hunt. We met back, and we were doing a bonfire, and I can remember Pastor Kathy was the kids pastor at the time, and she had a little bit of a hip issue or whatever, and I remember one of my youth, his name was Julian, and he and I were cooking hot dogs and stuff, and it was just in Florida. You don't have like a fire pit like you do here.
Because it's a billion degrees.
It's a billion degrees and you'll burn down everything. So you have a metal fire pit. And so it's not like a bonfire. It's like a controlled... Anyway, so it had a lid. The fire pit had a lid. And we had taken it off because we were about to cook, and we slid it underneath. But it could only go about halfway underneath. So we slid it underneath, and... Julian turned around to do something, and then I got around to do something, and Pastor Joanne had just got her plate of food, didn't know that we had slid the lid underneath, steps like partially on the lid, and she lost her balance because now she's trying to, she stepped on the lid and thought she had more room to go, and now she's throwing her body to not fall in the fire and lands on her hip and lets out this massive scream. Now, I had just challenged the youth to read through Matthew that week, which is a bit of reading, but I said, I want you to read through Matthew this week. And I was like, well, if I'm going to tell them to do that, I better do that, right? So I read through Matthew that week, and one of the things I kept seeing over and over were these miracles. Over and over and over. Anywhere Jesus went, there were miracles. And I thought to myself, well, what in the world? Like, that if that's how Jesus lived his life, then we should be seeing that as well. And so anyway, she falls. We already know she has hip problems. She lands on her hip. She lets out this scream. Now, I have no physical evidence of, like, we didn't take her to a doctor or anything, but in that moment, I have no proof that she broke her hip. But in that moment, I was like, nope, not happening. And I was like, get her up. We're taking her over here. We sat her down on this chair, and I was like, gather around, guys. We're going to pray. And we prayed, and I literally felt like I reached into the spiritual realm, grabbed healing, and gave it to her. And when I got done praying for her, and I know that might sound weird, but that's honestly what I believe. And when we got done praying, I said, all right, stand up. And she had a bruise there, like, that she actually hit, because there was, but she was fine. She was walking after that, no pain, and I believe that she broke her hip that night. I can't prove it,
right?
But I believe that she broke her hip that night, and we prayed for her, and boom, she was fine.
I'm going to respond to that. Is Jason on the line?
Jason is still.
Yeah. All right. Let's take this call because he wants to get. I want to respond to this because it's going to get fun.
All right.
Yeah.
Hello.
Jason, are you there?
Yes, I am.
All right. Do you have a guest for us?
Yes, I do. The numbers are 619.
Wah, wah, wah. Oh, there it is.
Yep. No, that wasn't it. I'm sorry, but thank you for calling. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. If you want to call, the number's right down there at the bottom of the screen, but 330-595-1600, and then you can guess the three-digit code, win $1,000 plus AirPod Pros. All right, my response. Let's talk some physics here. Okay.
Okay.
Quantum physics, quantum mechanics. There's a couple states of matter, and particles can be in a position, like can be in an off position, a negative, or an on position with positive, or there's a third one called a superposition, where a particle can be in the on and off state at the same time. So picture me holding a light bulb, right? And the light bulb is on, you can see it, or the light bulb is off. So what would a superposition of a light bulb being on or off look like in the physical world?
It would be both on and off is what you're saying.
So it's the potentiality to be both on and off at the same time. So that's in the physical world, where if you can have a condition that has the potential to be in two different states at the same given time, and you call it into reality, right? In the physics world, you would call it into reality by observation. So if you observe it to be on, then it is on, and there's no argument. And if you have the ability to observe it as being off, then it's off, and it's all based on the observer. The observer has faith and calls it into existence. That's actually physics. So that's the physical world, and we're talking something that seems a whole lot like the metaphysical world.
Yeah. So let's go into that faith and belief realm,
Yes.
because I think that's something we talk about a lot for our audience. You know, everything from law of attraction stuff to, you know, the belief, not just the belief system, but the idea that by having faith, it's the only way we get anything in our lives. We literally, it's through what we believe. We have that which we believe. And so let's go there a little bit, because there are some instances in the Bible, like Jesus goes to Nazareth, and it says he's unable to do a lot of miracles there because of their unbelief. Mm-hmm. And I've said this to you before, and we're going to go there with Pastor Mike here. It's interesting because the people there were limiting what God could do because of their unbelief. Jesus, Son of God, perfect, all of that stuff, shows up, and in other places he heals everybody. But there's almost a partnership between the supernatural power, the element that's there outside of time and space, like you're talking about, and our faith. And so the only issue, according to you, that we have control of is our level of belief. Is that correct?
Yes, and I'm going to let me add some definition to that. So what Michael was talking about is that he decided that she was going to be healed, right?
Right.
And so that's almost like, it's like, I want to say I believe because it might be cool to say I believe.
Right.
But if you're like, I'm going to jump out of the airplane and know the parachute's there and not even think about it, that's true belief. And it's so like, I could say, I think you packed it, and you're like, jump. I'm like, no, I'm not going to do it right now. That's like, that's wishing and hoping, but that's not belief. So that's what you had, different than maybe somebody else, or like, yeah, I really want you to be healed, kind of, you know, because it's not a life-death type of example.
Yeah, no, that's so good. You know, it makes me think of, you know, a couple different illustrations, but, you know, kind of the idea that for, you know, some people use that wishing and hoping, and we kind of throw that out there. We're like, well, it'd be nice if this happened, but it's not, this must happen. It's a different sort of mentality and way to approach a problem, an illness, an ailment, any of those things is, you know, I'm not just believing this, but I'm declaring this to be so. And I'm going to position myself, I'm going to stake my life, finance, etc., put it on the line because I believe this.
Yeah, and not as like a martyr either. So if I say, hey, money is infinite, right? Then if you challenge me, I mean, you could totally challenge me on that and say, go ahead and take everything that's in your bank account and send it to a foreign country, right? And if money's infinite, right, I'll do that without even hesitation. But if I hesitate, then maybe my faith just isn't as quite as deep as it is.
If you're going to do that, my name is Doug. Last name is Reed.
In what country are you in?
You spell thousand, T-H.
You follow? I mean, that's the level of belief. Because I know that faith and belief has a little bit of weakness to it right now.
It does, yeah. So. No, yeah, that's so good. Where do you fall on that? How much of it is dependent, and this is an argument I think even amongst the church a little bit, how much of the healing, the stuff that comes, is dependent on our faith? Because Jesus says to people all the time, your faith has made you well. People are very uncomfortable with that, because then it's like, well, did I not get healed because I didn't have enough faith? You know, would God withhold his power because I didn't have belief? Like, how do you marry that or navigate that?
I think it's situational, because you'll see there are times where it says that I think I immediately go to the woman with the issue of blood.
Yeah.
He turns around and says, your faith has made you well.
Great illustration.
But I think it is working in tandem, and I think it's situational, because I know, let's put it this way, when Jesus walks up to, I believe it was the blind man at the gate called Beautiful, right? And they're like, well, who sinned, this man or his mother?
Yeah.
And he said, neither. This happened so that the glory of God could be shown.
Yeah.
How many people walked in there and tried to heal him before?
Yeah.
And they could pray all they want, but until Jesus showed up,
That timing was important.
the timing was off. So I think it's situational. I think it's a both and, not an either or, if that makes sense. It's a I think God wants to work with people. He wants to work with you. I'm gonna screw this up. You're gonna laugh because you know right where I'm going.
I know exactly.
I'm going to be impressed.
Without God, we cannot, but without us, He will not. So it's a togetherness. He wants to work with us, and when we partner with Him, amazing things can happen.
Right.
He says, if you believe in your heart and don't doubt, you can say to this mountain, be cast into the sea, and it'll be cast into the sea. And so, so there's something to be said about our belief. It is our, your faith has made you well. Yeah. So there's something to be said about our faith, but it's never us actually doing it. It's always Jesus. Until Jesus enters the situation, nothing's going to happen. So right. I think it's a both and I think some of it's situational. I'll just be honest, I don't understand why God heals some and not others. Yeah. I can't explain that. I know biblically, I don't see anywhere where someone came to Jesus and He sent him away not healed.
Yeah.
Except for when He was in His hometown, but there's no specific example. It just says that He couldn't
because of their unbelief.
Because of their unbelief, he couldn't do many miracles. He still did some.
Still did some, yeah.
But He couldn't do many. So I think it's a both and, not an either or. So it's His power working in us and through us, and our belief that activates that. But
so there's an element, and I would agree. There's certainly an element of our faith that moves the hand of God. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. Hebrews 11:6. Yeah. So there's an element to that that he'll get quicker. That's okay. Yeah. And I know from a physical standpoint, a scientific standpoint, the way that you look at supernatural events. Whether it's a healing or it's the sun standing still or some sort of physical event taking place that's miraculous, there's some sort of contingent of belief that has activated that. Yes?
So I'm processing that. So I was hung up on the sun standing still. What is that? Do I know that one?
I love this. So Joshua in the Old Testament gets into a battle, and he asks God causes the sun to stand still, and it never becomes night, and they're able to win the battle. It's the short version. Okay. And it's a supernatural miracle, and scientists look at the text and look at the scripture like, how did that physically happen? The earth wouldn't stop spinning. So what happened in that moment was, and they have all kinds of weird explanations and stuff like that. Just like when they look at, Noah's flood, was it global, was it local, etc. When they look at other supernatural phenomenons that happen in the Bible, they look at that and they try and run it through a scientific filter. Well, how did this happen? How did the Red Sea part? Did God hold up the hands, or is there some sort of physical explanation for these sort of things? So very much Joe's sort of question is looking at that going, all right, I understand God may have caused it, but how did God cause it? Then becomes your question, what caused the waters to be built up like walls and they were able to cross on dry ground? How does that work in that? And then, when people are like, well, that probably didn't happen, and then they discover Egyptian chariots at the bottom of the Red Sea and stuff like that. So archaeology continues to prove the Bible again and again and again, over and over and over. But it's the supernatural stuff that Thomas Jefferson had a problem with. He took his scissors and cut out all the miracles because he just couldn't explain them, and he was frustrated by it, and he said, that doesn't make any sense. And you have a lot of people that fall into that camp. They're like, well, Jesus was a good teacher, but all the supernatural stuff is just weird. But man, I can tell you over and over and over again how many people we've seen have issues similar to my wife. I can speak very as an authority on that because I saw the blood work. I watched her hair fall out. I saw, I watched the symptoms, and I watched the diagnosis be confirmed, and I watched the medicine, was going to be prescribed, and then I watched the healing take place, and I've seen now 3 years worth of clean blood work. So I can look at that. I can pinpoint the prayer. I can pinpoint the diagnosis. I can pinpoint all the stuff, and where our faith entered the picture and God's power stepped in. And people have a hard time with that because they would rather it just be like, do good things, Joe.
Right.
They would rather it just be that. But it's this relationship with the other side outside of time and space, that supernatural kind of element that makes most people uncomfortable.
Right. And you don't get to have a better understanding it the more that you look at it. In fact, it's the other way around where
'Cause
more
he's
thing
infinite.
gets
Yep.
into that space. So I don't have a more sophisticated thread of explanation.
Right.
All I know is, okay, you're on the right trail and I'm on the right trail, and it's going to be a hybrid of one of it. So I'll give you like an example. Like there's some things in science that make weird things happen too. So you could say that there were weird miracles that people observed, but then I can say like, you take an element that has so much capacity, and when you put one more in than capacity, we're what more than what something can hold, right?
Right.
And so what happens is the density increases and it changes into a completely different thing. So you might add fish, and then you put so many things in this fish, and it's no longer a fish anymore, right? Kind of blows your mind at that
Right.
point because you're changing the fabric of our perception. And like when you start dealing with the densities of gravity, you take light out of the equation. Now you can't even see the thing that you're trying to study. It gets weirder as you get into that place. So faith probably has a better angle on it than the science part of it, just because of vision.
See, I think a fun show for us, an episode for us, would be to have like a scientist on, to have a medical doctor, maybe have Dr. Mike.
Yeah,
come back on.
right. That would be good.
And we can take 3 or 4 miracles from the Bible, read the text, and let's just what do we think happened here? You look at something like Elijah on Mount Carmel.
Yeah, give me a couple. I want to do the stupid man's version.
So Elijah on Mount Carmel, 1 Kings 18, Ahab, Jezebel, you have all this sort of junk going on. Elijah, the prophet, challenges the prophets of Baal to a competition.
Okay.
And he says, you're going to build an altar, I'm going to build an altar, and neither of us are going to light it on fire. We're going to prepare the sacrifice, the wood, etc. And the God who answers by fire, he's God.
This is my kind of story, competition.
Yeah, so competition. I've been on the top of Mount Carmel. He picked it very appropriately. You can see all of northern Israel. He wanted to speak to all the people. And so when his fire lit up, they would know that the Lord's God. And so the prophets of Baal built their altar. They whipped and cut themselves, as was their custom, until their blood was flowing, and they called out. And I love Elijah because he gets sarcastic and mocks them in the middle of it. And he's
Really?
he goes, you should yell louder. Perhaps your God's on vacation. Perhaps he's in the bathroom taking a poop. He goes, you should yell a little louder. He's like making fun of them as they're doing this. And so they're going. So then he takes prepares his whole altar, digs a trench around it, pours all this water on top of it, stones, etc., and then he prays, and fire comes down, burns up the rocks, licks up the water until there's nothing. And then everybody's like, the Lord's God. Then he takes a sword, kills a whole bunch of people. It's awesome. So when you look at that, it's like, well, did God send like a meteor from heaven? Because what burns rock? I mean, you start thinking about the temperatures that things have to burn at. Like water, okay, but that would usually have to boil off to burn water instantaneously, the way that it, kind of puts there. So then you start asking, well, what temperature does that have to burn? What kind of fuel is required for that? So is that something that one of the, I guess, did it come fire from heaven like that, and just shoot down and it was a meteor that took it out? Like, we don't know.
Gotcha.
But when you read the text and you look at that, you and I have talked about watching that movie, Is Genesis History? You look at the flood. Is it a global or local flood? Well, you have several flood stories. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the Native Americans had one. The ancient Israelites had one. The Mesopotamian has one. Everybody had one. So it seems like it was more than just a local flood. It seems like it took place everywhere, even though they had various details a little different. They all agree that there was some sort of massive flood. Some scientists argue that actually is what messes up the carbon dating, gives us a younger Earth and all that sort of stuff, and they say that the flood took out the dinosaurs, etc. Could have been a big meteor, and there's all sorts of explanations. I'm telling you, you would eat that movie.
Okay.
Documentary. But I mean, you can look at miracle after miracle, even stuff that Jesus does. There's a blind guy, he spits on the ground, makes some mud, says, "Here, go put this in," puts it on his eyes. He says, "Go wash in the pool of Siloam." The guy washes, and then he can see. Some sort of enzyme in the mud? Did he have cataracts? And we don't know. And that's the hard part when you look at ancient texts like that, and you're trying to decipher miracles, and you're trying to decipher those things. They weren't giving details like scientists would give details. They're very much sharing in a different cultural context. So, but it'd be fun to pick that apart and to have a doctor and a scientist and go, all right, what's actually going on.
What could make that
Right,
happen?
exactly.
Kind of thing.
You know, with some of the demoniacs and stuff like that, there are psychologists that are like, well, you know, maybe they were schizophrenic, or maybe they had, you know, some sort of, and they didn't have a thing for that. You know, maybe there was epilepsy going on there, or whatever, and people are looking for those natural explanations. And so I think you would have a lot of fun with that. We should definitely do that.
Okay.
Is it what requires more faith, though? Let me just ask that.
Yeah.
To believe that a meteor came down
Yeah, right.
at that temperature, at that specific time,
In that location, precisely.
right after he prayed and did exactly that and didn't cause any damage to that area,
Yeah, it was just the right size.
or that God did it.
Right.
What's more?
Yeah.
So I feel like on some level you have to go out on faith and believe something,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, the most staunch atheist has it takes a lot of faith to be an atheist. I'm just bottom line. And I know somebody on Reddit's going to comment nasty things that I said that, but bottom line is evolutionary biology, right? You get to a point where you say, and where did that come from? And everybody says, well, it's the Big Bang, right? But you start asking really smart scientists with alphabet soup after their name, and they'll say things like a primordial soup on the back of crystals morphed into life. And I'm like,
And where'd that come from?
right. And I'm like, and that's more plausible, or ancient aliens came here and seeded life. That's more plausible than the God of heaven speaking everything. Like, you start looking at that, and when you start taking those layers back and back and back, at some point, someone, even if you want to go with a super deist kind of view of God, like he just started everything and backed out of the way, created the rules and said, have at it. Bottom line is, at some point, we get to somebody who's interacting from outside of time and space, outside of the physical world and in the metaphysical, and has created and knows how all these systems work and is able to put them all together.
Have you ever heard of string theory, by the way?
I feel like I have. But
Okay, another
refresh
physics
me.
things where
Refresh me.
a bunch of like places throughout space are interconnected, and time and space don't matter when those two things. So those things can experience things no matter how far they are away, the exact same scenario. So string theory connects all other things. Wormholes, for instance, like two spaces that don't really have the distance or time between the two places, right? And so, if when you were talking about like the meteor hitting whatever, I mean, every time I go down to this, I'm like, okay, we're going to this, but if I don't believe in time, then something hitting the Earth really didn't happen. It was always at the Earth, because you would have to have distance of starting there and ending there. It has the potentiality to hit the Earth at any time, so it is in both positions of hitting the Earth and not hitting the Earth.
The light bulb's on and off.
That's it.
See, I'm following you.
You are
I'm
too.
picking up what you're putting down. So good.
Yeah, but we do. If anybody watching this has some, we need expertise. I was thinking wheelhouse when
Yeah.
you were explaining this. We need someone who knows physics way better than I.
Yeah,
has
yeah.
some traditional education there.
Dr. Mike could definitely come on.
Dr.
and do-
Mike from the physiological side. We need somebody that if it is some kind of brain or mental thing, somebody who has psychology.
Yeah. It'd be a lot of fun to do, to like dive into that sort of stuff. One of the things that Joe and I so enjoy talking about when we get into some of the spiritual stuff is like I'm totally okay with I don't know, and I'm totally okay with the mystery, and I'm totally okay with, that probably went that way, even though, the text says this and traditional belief says that, but maybe perhaps science has a different explanation. And so I love exploring that sort of stuff. We should definitely do that. So Pastor Mike, I think for you to navigate some of this stuff, we're going to switch and go a little personal here, so it'll be kind of fun.
Hot seat.
You're getting married,
Yep.
and
July
we're
16th.
all excited for that. Honeymoon, all that. You're going to be staying here in Ohio, thank God. But what are you looking forward to? And let's do it this way, Joe. What marriage advice do you have for Pastor Mike and Ashley?
Best thing you'll ever do. It's so cool. It's most enabling. It's just awesome.
You know what we need to do?
What's up?
Once they get married and come back.
Bring all three.
Yes, your wife, my
Yes.
wife, Ashley, and
We'll
Pastor
have a-
Mike, and we will talk about all things marriage, life, etc. Get to hear about.
Our wives are more interesting than we are, so
It's way
people
more
tune in for those.
I'm sure
shows.
Ashley's more interested in that too. So
What's something you're believing for right now on a personal level? What's something you're having faith for and trying to activate that supernatural?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's bring some of that. Bring it.
This might be too broad. Maybe you're asking
He
something.
started
very,
talking himself out of it.
very
This is not how this
specific.
works. Let's try this again. Let's do
Okay,
this.
just hold on. So,
You're willing to stake what on that?
can you imagine? I have to go back to this. I'm sorry. I have to. Mount Carmel. Can you imagine the faith that I won't say that, but you know what I'm thinking. The faith that it took to say, let's have a competition.
Yeah.
The belief and the faith that he had in God, and the fact that their gods
Was not going to show up.
were not real, but his was.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that?
Because if you're wrong, you die.
Yeah.
I mean, that's...
Literally. And
That's the parachute example.
Exactly,
I mean,
yeah.
that is it.
and it's literally like these people believed that much in their fake God, right? That they were willing to stake their lives on it, and well, they lost. Sorry. But can you imagine that kind of faith? Anyway,
This is where you're going to declare what you're going to manifest in this world. I want to hear some confidence behind it.
what am I believing
What are you
for?
bringing in? Bring it.
Well, okay. So at the beginning of the year, I really felt like this year for me, like the phrase I got. Normally it's just a word, but I feel like heaven on earth is, and so I want to see that in everything. I want to see that. I lead worship. I want to see that in worship. I want to see that in the church. I want to see that in my personal life. I want to see that in my marriage in 2 months.
Yeah.
I want and that's what I want to see. If you're gonna ask me to get more specific, because I feel like you are.
That's a good thing, but I wasn't.
I think
I love you, Mike.
we need to spend more time
Yes,
together.
we do.
But I think the other thing is I think I mentioned this to you. You know this. Like, I really do want to start writing music.
Yeah.
And I have, I mentioned, no one has heard that except for you and Pastor Michael now. But I have an idea for a song, and I just got to sit down and actually do it. And so
phraseology, changing the language, not you want to or you're going to. That sounds like somebody who's looking for an obstacle to tell them that they can't do that. Somebody who's gonna do it, it's like, I'm staking everything on it, and that's going to happen, and don't get in my way because I'm going to bowl over you. So get a little more, less bashful and a little bit more.
He always tells me to be very specific
Yes.
with those things, because the more
Is that what
specific...
he just said to me, and then I said
He
no?
did. Yeah.
And then I did exactly what he said, and now I feel foolish.
No, as soon as he said that, I'm like, well, he's
I wouldn't call you on it. He did.
he was sitting there, I'm like, Joe always wants specific. What do you mean he's not going to tell me what's specific?
I was listening at the time. I didn't want to be a dick or anything.
But in getting specific, what specific allows you to do is it puts you in the frame of mind of actually having that. So, like, I prayer walked this morning at church at 7:30 this morning. It was beautiful out. Spent about 20 minutes just walking around the property. I hadn't done that in a while. And I stood there and looked at the rest of the parking lot, all 199 spots that are going to be paved, and all of
You hear
that's
that
coming to
language?
us. And
He makes me so proud.
and I've learned a lot of that.
Listen,
in this
I'm still a
relationship.
protege, okay?
All right.
But doing that and being there, I walked over each spot, and I'm not just visualizing, but I want to be detailed about it, and I want this here, and I want that there, and looking at the outside, and I looked at the area that we're making for the smoking area. Yes, we are building a smoking area at the church because we love people, and we have a whole bunch of people that are still figuring stuff out, and they need to have a Newport every once in a while. So, we're creating that area, and it's going to be good. But going to that spot and picturing the blocks that are going to be there and the seating that's going to be there, and doing that allows me to put myself in a mindset where it's already here, standing and looking at the house that I believe is going to be our parsonage and the space that's going to be opened out to Hitchcock there. Like, that puts me in that frame of mind where it's not like, man, it would be really nice if this happened. That's where I was 5, 6, 7 years ago.
And I'll phrase it this way. Just remember this. As soon as he stopped apologizing for what he wanted, things started happening.
100%.
Just remember that forever. It's easy.
He'd be like, why do you apologize for that? And I'm like, I should stop apologizing.
Yeah. It's not humble. It's not like, it's not putting it in a better light. You got to make declarations and insist that something's going to happen. That's the only way to fish it out of where it is and bring it to you.
Yeah. So we're like spoken over time. We're moving here.
This is the longest show I think we've ever done.
This was good though.
Yeah.
My bad.
No. Well, I mean, it did.
Because you got too specific.
I'll try
We
to
asked
keep
him for a number at the
next
beginning.
time.
It was like a 5-minute intro to get to the number, and then he gave us a number with a 0 in it.
What the heck? Wasted. Do you want to try another
Yeah,
number?
you should try another number. before we go.
523. Let's go with
523.
Yeah.
You're sure?
No.
Here's your buffer. Sorry, Michael.
I appreciate the attempt. Number 2.
Well, regardless of, or irregardless, which is it? Regardless, irregardless,
Regardless.
they mean the same thing.
Sure.
Yeah. No matter how you feel about church, faith, life, all this sort of stuff, bottom line is we live in a very cool world that does very cool stuff, and I happen to believe was created by a really great God that does powerful stuff, and by faith we can activate stuff into our life by His power, by His grace. And so it's really, really good stuff. And so join us on Thursday. Joe and I are going to jump into, I think, another chapter on Think and Grow Rich that I want to talk
Yeah,
about.
we can do
We'll
that.
do some law of attraction
And Bigfoot
stuff.
probably too.
Bigfoot probably jumped in the middle of that. Well, we love you guys, and we hope that you enjoyed this crazy journey today.
Thank you for listening to this show on Youngstown Studio. If you like our programming, we invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow our Facebook page, or subscribe to your favorite podcast platform like iTunes or Spotify. This is original Youngstown content, and we would appreciate you sharing the videos and the word about us. Thank you.